And then you can go and re-audit it and make sure that the system after a patch is still strong. Okay? That audit's basically a hardening assessment. It'll actually say, this is the stuff you could harden, okay, that isn't hardened. You can be like, wow, I should fix that. Then you can fix it, and then you can re-audit. Now, what I want to do is tell you a little about what Bastille OS X is doing. Okay, so some of you say, wait, Bastille OS X, Bastille, they're the same thing. This is Bastille Linux for OS X. Bastille Linux is this increasingly misnamed piece of code that runs, that like gets installed by default on HPUX nowadays. Yeah, so it's still called Bastille Linux because that's what we called it. Bastille has been one of the most popular hardening and audit tools for about 6 years now. It ships in HPUX as part of the installer. If you install an HPUX system now new, I know only so many of you do, but those of you that do, Bastille is actually part of the install process. You can select a security level. You get all that's on HPUX because a bunch of guys at HP did the work on the clock, and that's really cool. Thank you, Hewlett-Packard. I hope you figure out what's up with your board. I'm going to get so sued. Or at least have people grab my phone records. So Bastille is available for most of the major Linux distributions. We're now extending support to OS X Tiger. The only thing is, the front end right now is still X, which is a pain in the butt. If anybody makes Cocoa apps, I would love some help. We're going to put together a small team of people who hopefully can make us a new front end in Cocoa. You can get in the credits. It'll be fun. You can come up and talk about how you made it work. That's what I got. We're free software. I don't have any money to offer. It's just credit. Yeah. Anyway, crediting groupies, because you get lots of groupies in open source. Sorry, that's the vodka talking. Okay. So, Bastille works on these whole bunch of Linux distros, HPUX, OS X Tiger. The cool thing about Bastille, listen, people thought Bastille was really cool because when it first came out, instead of just hardening a system, it would actually let you choose what to harden, but more importantly, it would tell you why you wanted to do things. It would say things, it would go through and tell you, this is why you might want to do this, this is when you wouldn't want to do it, so people could know why they wanted to harden, and they could do it without fear because they wouldn't have to worry about what's going to break if they do a hardening step. So we added auditing a couple of years ago with the help of the Navy, and we put in auditing so that Bastille could tell you what should be hardened. That means that shops that don't want to do this automatically, well, they can do it all by hand, but at least something's telling them, giving them a good list of stuff that isn't done yet. Okay? The other cool thing is that when you teach people, you help them make better decisions for security. So I like that. Now, that teaching component's was our really, really unique thing. Now our really unique thing is we teach and we'll both audit and okay, that teaching thing was like, it's like, okay. It says, hey, turn off Telnet. And you're like, no, that's how I administer my systems. And I'm like, no, turn off Telnet because it's an unencrypted protocol, I can sniff it and I can take it over. And you're like, oh, screw Telnet, I'll use SSH, right? Why did we do this? I like to say that we did this to make the world a better place. We wanted to educate people. Other people might tell you that it's probably because Jay's a control freak. We did it because he wanted you to do what he said. Well, okay, whatever. That joke never goes anywhere. So anyway, Bastille's actually been really, really good because it breaks exploits. Hardening breaks exploits. A good example of hardening breaking exploits is putting a better firewall on a system. Okay, you can't get to cups, so you can't get to the NTP daemon. So if they have zero-day vulnerabilities, I don't necessarily have to worry about you hitting them, right? Okay, so that's one example of how hardening breaks vulnerabilities. The other way, configuring things, so you configure things to make them harder to break into. Well, sometimes exploits don't work because the code they needed to get at was off. That code was unreachable because they didn't have the permissions they needed, or it breaks because for the exploit to work, it needed to have root level privilege, and the thing's running as non-root, or something's trooted, or whatever. So hardening actually breaks exploits, and I normally talk about this a great deal more, but I'll just say we made Bastille before when Red Hat 6 first came out. We made it for Red Hat 6 before anybody had before any of the vulnerabilities that came out. And we just basically did normal, stupid best practices and a few cool ideas of our own, but mostly just, normal, non-rocket science stuff. And it turns out we broke basically every major exploit. Every remote exploit against Red Hat 6 was broken by Bastille. It doesn't mean Bastille is really cool. It is. But it's that, thank you, it's that hardening just works really well. It doesn't get lots of press because it's not that sexy. Well, I mean, it's a little sexy, but, not too But, you know, it works really well. There have been a bunch of tests of hardening. NSA's IAD, Information Assurance Directorate, the people who are in charge of trying to make sure that our computers don't get broken into, basically stood up a Windows system, and they said, okay, 95% of the exploits that worked before we hardened didn't work after we hardened. That kind of stuff, you know, call it a 9 in 10, yeah, it works pretty nice. I'm happy to take that. I'm happy to take that. It gives me much better odds at a conference. Okay, so Bastille does this hardening assessment stuff. It's got this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Bastille, and then I'm going to take your questions. But Bastille does this hardening assessment stuff, which is a read-only, and it basically says, this is how well the system's doing right now. This system's really, really well hardened, but you should do these two things. This system is horribly hardened. You should do all these things, right? That stuff's actually useful for a few reasons. The first is triage. Triage. What do I mean by triage? Well, you got 100 systems, and you know, you're going to go a hardening. Which one do you harden first? Okay, out of those 100 systems, these 3 are the red-headed stepchildren that have never been patched, never been hardened, nothing. It'd be nice to find which 3 they are, okay? That's triage. Okay, what's the other reason that's really, what's one of the other reasons assessment's nice? Motivation. We were doing one of the first auditing tools, one of the first assessment tools. I gotta not say audit, because audit sounds bad. We made one of the first scoring tools for Unix, and we gave it to a conference speaker. And that conference speaker said, I'll beta test your tool. And we're like, thank you. And he ran the tool on his own workstation, and it came back and said, 6 out of 10. And he said, what the? And he got all kinds of upset. He got red in the face. He didn't see himself as a 6 out of 10 kind of guy. That's a D student. Screw that. And he sat down, and 15 minutes later, he hardened the system a whole bunch. And he ran it again, and it said 8.5 out of 10. He's like, okay, B+, I'll take that. We motivated him to harden a system simply by giving him a bad grade. He's a 45-year-old guy. He's been out of school for a while. We gave him a bad grade, and he went and bettered his security. Okay, I'll take whatever method I can get. Okay, so the other reason this assessment stuff is good is skew detection. You run Bastille. You harden a system. You harden a system really well. It says, okay, 9 out of 10. And it gives you all the things that are hardened and not hardened. You patch. You use the system for a little while. You go back. You say, I wonder if it's still just as well hardened. Well, okay, run the assessment tool. The assessment tool comes back and says, 6 out of 10. These are all the things that aren't hardened anymore. That's skew detection. Now you've got some kind of, you know, little way of detecting things that have come unhardened. Well, that works pretty well. It's a pretty useful thing. So I'm not gonna go into all the individual things that Bastille does. I will put these slides up on the website. What I'll do instead is I'll show you a Bastille run. How's that? And then if you guys ask me, I'll tell you what Bastille does, but you know, we should leave some time for questions. I've run Bastille. Like I said, it's an X-based tool. The GUI's in X. The GUI is also in curses. Yeah. X is supplied by PearlTK. PearlTK is not entirely perfect, but it works well enough to make Bastille run. PearlTK is perfect everywhere else. For some reason, I can't make it work perfectly on the Mac. Okay, so to get Bastille on, you've got to put PearlTK on your system. Our fancy installer package will, like many other things, install PearlTK for you if you don't have it. For everyone who downloads Bastille tonight, you're not going to get the PearlTK. You're going to have to go get it yourself. I'll put up instructions on the site on how to do that. Okay, so here's our front-end GUI. And the way this GUI works is, I'm not sure how much you can read the text. It's okay, I guess. You've got a list of modules, which is basically groups of questions. And then you've got this main screen. There's a question, there's an explanation, there's a place for your answer. Okay? The question says, well, do you want to do this thing? The explanation tells you why you might want to and why you might not want to. So we can go through and we can kind of just say, okay, so we've got this thing and it basically just asks a bunch of questions. This says, do you want to turn off setUID to ping? setUID, good for turning off for privilege escalation. Most of us aren't too worried about it, but I've seen a number of systems rooted from privilege escalation just from finding vulnerabilities in setUID utilities, so you can choose what you want to. We go through and just turn off a bunch of the setUID stuff. And it says RSH, and do you want to turn off setUID, this and that. The next thing says, do you want to make it, thank you, we're down to 5 minutes. Okay, so the next thing says, do you want to make it so that users can't see all of each other's own files? Now, it says UMask, but that's what UMask means. So we can say, yeah, we want to set it so the users can't all read each other's files. And it says, do you want to password protect single user mode? I'm choosing no right now. It says, do you want to put up a really TCP wrappers rule set and then tune it yourself later on, and I'm going to say no for now. It's going to say, do you want to put up authorized only messages that pop up at login? And I like that. Okay. It's going to say, it asks me who owns the machine. It asks me about preventing local DOS. And it says, do you want to turn off the NFS client daemons? Do you want to turn off zeroconf? Do you want to, okay, I'm going to go right through these and choose the defaults. Well, let's turn off Bluetooth. Okay, oh, Bluetooth is a default. Okay, so I'm configuring Bluetooth better, I'm turning off cups, and I'm installing a better firewall. And it says, do you want to shut off access to Bonjour? Yes. I click that one button, Bonjour is no longer accessible. I don't have to worry about everybody else in the network finding out everything they'll find out from it, which is good. Because, well, then I'll put my machine on the network later, because it's not on right now, because I don't trust you guys worth a darn. Okay, well, I'm sorry. Here, let me put it on. Okay, so what else? I'm getting rid of no zeroconf access, get rid of TCP. Asks you, what TCP ports do you want to leave open? What are you running? Are you running an SSH server on here? You just put in a list. So let's just put in 22 and say I'm running an SSH server. It says, what UDP ports do you want to leave open? And it comes with the default of 137 for Windows file sharing. So I'll leave that there. And then it says, what do you want to do? So I'm going to click on Save Configuration. And now I've got this button that says Apply Configuration to System. And now you find out the other reason we're in beta. Okay? When I click on this, the config file is written to the system, but it's not acted upon because, for some reason, the front end can't launch the back end that actually makes the changes. That's fine. No big deal. You run Bastille minus B. Okay, I was running Bastille or Bastille minus X. Okay, you run Bastille minus B. That's the thing you run if you were to create a config on one system and copy that config file to 100 other systems. On those systems, you just run the back end. You just run the part that does the work. You don't have to run the GUI everywhere to make this thing work. So I run Bastille minus B, and it says, okay, I'm doing the hardening. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5. Okay, so call it 5 seconds later, and I'm done. My system is hardened. Okay, what do I get out of that? Now, I haven't, PFW, flush, I haven't booted the system yet. I'm not going to reboot for you guys, but I will start up my firewall. I said I'd start up my firewall. Well, that's funny. The demo gods have struck again. Okay, well, let's look at what the firewall would have been. Here's our Bastille firewall. Okay, this is what the firewall would be if it ran. I'm not sure why it's not exactly running. But this is what our firewall rule is. It just puts in a new firewall, and that new firewall basically gives you what you were expecting in the first place. If you ran Bastille on your system tonight for nothing else, I'd just say no to everything except for the firewall and just put a better firewall on your system. Because really, you deserve one. Okay? That's it. I'm going to take questions. Yeah, in the back. Rich Lindbergh has just asked, when we ran Bastille with the minus B switch, was that the Batard switch? Simple, am I allowed to let out the truth about Batard? Batard is vaporware. There's a Simple Nomad at the last Security Opus conference, back when it was called Interzone West, threatened a tool called Batard